Christmas on the Slopes is an okay film. This was released in 2022. It's directed by Marco Deufemia, and I apologise if I've mispronounced that, and written by Paula Tiberius, and it stars Soma Chhaya as Christmas on the Slopes. And honestly, I didn't mind the narrative, but I feel like Sophia was not an interesting protagonist. And I have to say, the other romantic interest, I never really felt any real connection with. Sophia is a celebrity chef, and she decides to get away from the drama that's currently in her life and goes on vacation. And when she's in this resort, this hotel, she wanders into the kitchen, as one would do. Grand sense of entitlement there, but she wanders into the kitchen and the chef mistakes her for the sous chef who is supposed to be starting work that day, but the chef's unaware that the sous chef is unavailable for a couple of days. So he thinks Sophia is this chef, and well, she decides to go along with it. And then obviously there's this panic in her every now and then that somebody's going to find out who she is. I find it hard to believe that she's as famous as the film suggests she is, but nobody working in that restaurant knew who she was. Yet various guests in the hotel occasionally would know who she is. Some people recognized her, yet the people who work with food don't recognize her. Or is that normal? If you work with food, do you have an aversion to celebrity chefs? That could be a thing. I don't know, but from my perspective, I found it very unbelievable that she's so famous, yet nobody there working in the hotel's restaurant knew who she was. Not very convincing. And the chef as well, played by Olivier Renaud, is just not very interesting. There's nothing wrong with him. I didn't dislike him, and there's nothing wrong with the performance, but I felt like he always had this barrier up in front of him. So I never really felt like that I, as a viewer, got to know him. I never got to know about his personality, and I could only look at him as the chef. I couldn't look past that because I didn't feel like I had any information about who he was outside of that. And that meant that when Sophia was developing feelings for him, I didn't believe it, because what was she falling in love with? Because I don't know who he is, I don't know what he's like, I don't know what his personality is like, so what's she falling in love with? We only know what she knows, but apparently she's falling in love with something that we can't see, or at least I can't see. I'm sure he's a lovely person, but the film just doesn't do a very good job of allowing us to find out more about him as a person, more about what makes him tick, more about what he's looking for. There are glimmers of when it seems like we're starting to scratch at the surface, but I still left the film feeling like I didn't know much about him as a person. I didn't know what he was like outside of being a chef, and that's it. And it meant that not only was I not emotionally invested in that part of the narrative, but I also didn't believe it. I didn't believe she was falling in love with him because I didn't know who he was. I didn't know the qualities about him that would allow her to fall in love with him. And I also wasn't that bothered about the potential that her identity would be revealed to him. I kind of didn't care, to be perfectly honest. I wasn't bored throughout the film. It was fine. It was interesting enough to keep me entertained for the hour and 20 minutes or however long it lasts. But at the end of it, when I reflected on it, I realised that nothing happened. Sophia is not a very likeable character, and Ansel, the chef, is not a very well written character. So it doesn't have that much going for it, and it's not very Christmassy. There is some Christmas, we have some decorations and things, but in general, it's not very festive. It could be set at any time of year, just in any slightly fancy resort. It's not, beyond that, it's not very Christmassy. Would I recommend it? Well, if like me, you will watch any Christmas rom-com, then sure, give it a go. It's watchable, particularly if you like food-based, restaurant-based films, then yeah, that's going to appeal. The food in it does definitely sound really delicious. The food, however, is better written than the characters, so it's not amazing. Also, the Christmas on the Slopes aspect doesn't really even come into it very much, so the title's quite misleading as well. All things considered, Christmas on the Slopes is not a good film, but if it sounds like your kind of film, then I will say that it's at least watchable.